At the time of the assassination, D.A. Green was a Dallas police officer, a patrolman temporarily assigned to the Special Service Bureau. And here's D.A. Green on his Find a Grave page. It's the same man, and he has something of an obituary story here. Law enforcement officer to the end. First 21 years with the Dallas Police Department, 18 years as investigator with the Texas Board of Pharmacy, then joined the Ellis County Sheriff's Department, retiring in April this year, and then he died. What a life. Now, in the story of the assassination, Officer Green appears in the testimony of Wilburn Walden Litchfield II. And I've extracted these sentences from his Warren Commission testimony. It's kind of complex to read the whole thing, but these are some points I thought might be relevant. From July 1963 until January of 1964, he did not work. Of course, that's the period of the assassination, just prior and after. I have a criminal record. When I was 19 years old, that's 11 years ago, and he's something of a scammer. I guess he was writing bad checks back then. I don't know if he has any recent crimes. I don't think he had anything recent, seriously, but what he's doing here is kind of funny. Anyway, he knew Jack Ruby since 1959 or so, and his claim to fame is that he saw Lee Harvey Oswald in the Carousel Club. And the reason he went there was that he was hanging out with Bertha Cheek, and Bertha wanted to run a club, wanted to acquire a club, and thought that Litchfield would be a good man to run the club, apparently. But, of course, part of the deal was that Litchfield would have to divorce his wife, and apparently Litchfield was considering this business opportunity, which might indicate that he's still something of a scammer, I don't know. But anyway, in connection with this interest, Bertha Cheek's interest in acquiring a club, he went to talk to Jack Ruby about purchasing the Vegas Club. Ruby said he couldn't sell that because there's $40,000 of federal liens on that, but Ruby offered to sell him the Carousel Club, but that was not appropriate for Litchfield's intentions. And this is when he saw Oswald while he was waiting to talk to Ruby at the Carousel Club. And Mr. Hubert says, was that statement you made that you had seen Oswald around somewhere, was it made before Oswald was shot? Yes. Did you repeat it thereafter? I did, to a friend of mine who was on the Vice Squad here in Dallas. And what is his name? Donald Green. And this is our Officer Green. And so he told Donald Green, his friend, on the Dallas Police Department, that he had seen Lee Harvey Oswald at the Carousel Club. And Officer Green persuaded him to come down to the police department and have a chat with the boys. And he filled out and signed an affidavit here. And I'm going to read this part if I can. While I was watching the crowd, he's talking about when he's in the Carousel Club and waiting for Jack Ruby. While I was watching the crowd, which consisted of about 20 people, I noticed about 4 tables directly in front of me a man in a white sweater. The reason I noticed this man was that everyone else in the carousel was either in a suit, sport coat, or in uniform. The next man that Jack saw, I skipped a part there. The next man that Jack saw was the man mentioned earlier who was sitting 4 tables in front of me wearing this white sweater. Jack came out and got this man, and they walked back toward the office. They were gone about 15 to 20 minutes. They both came out, and Jack stopped at the table by the wall and spoke to the man from California again. The gentleman in the V-neck sweater, the V-neck white sweater, and gray slacks walked by me underneath a bright light by the door. He was approximately 2 feet from where I was sitting. And this is the man that he said was Lee Harvey Oswald. And after that, he was given a lie detector test, and he was deemed to have failed that test. And this apparently is the report of the polygraph examination, and it's very scant on details. But it says here, Mr. Litchfield tried for the first half of the examination to control his breathing pattern. And it seems that that is the reason that he was deemed to have failed this examination, because he was trying to control his breathing pattern. I don't know if that's a good reason or not. I think someone might feel a little nervous and try to breathe deeply and relax. But whatever, he was deemed to have failed the lie detector test. And then we have this from an FBI report. I'll read the yellow part. Captain Jones stated Lieutenants Jack Revel and Frank Cornwall had interviewed Jack Ruby at the Dallas County Jail December 4th, 1963, at which time Ruby advised that the individual wearing the V-neck white sweater at the Carousel Club on the occasion described by Litchfield, and who Litchfield thought was identical with Oswald, was actually Edward Rocco, an employee of Cabaret magazine. Captain Jones stated that the Cabaret magazine is published by Trans-American Export News, Skokie, Illinois. And the problem with this explanation is that Litchfield had described the photographer there as being someone other than the person in the V-neck sweater. And that photographer that he's talking about, and there's more than I have quoted here, obviously is Rocco, who works for the magazine. So I don't know what's going on here. It seems like probably, either the FBI is lying, or Jack Ruby is lying, or Litchfield is lying, or Captain Jones is lying. Somebody's lying here, and it's not clear to me who it is. Anyway, the point, so far as this video is concerned, is that Don Green here was Litchfield's connection to the Dallas Police Department. And there's another Don Green in the story. On the right here, this is a Garrison document, but that doesn't mean it's completely full of shit. He's quoting a list here from a genuine document from the National Archives. This is a list, whether it's complete or not, I think it's not complete, of occupants living at 1026 North Beckley at the time of the assassination, even though it says 1326 there. And one of the names on there is Donald Green. And of course, that's the same name as this officer. Now, this officer is almost always called Don, though Litchfield did call him Donald. And Green and Donald are both relatively common names, but it is the same name, and of course, that piques my interest. And looking in the 1961 Dallas directory, we can see that Donald Green is not a very common name in Dallas. Among people who are in the directory, there's only two of them. One of them is our policeman. That's Don A. Green. And the other one is, I believe, a plumber. Oh, no, he's a truck driver. Donald L. So even though Donald is a common name and Green is a common name, the combination isn't as common in Dallas around this time. And therefore, it's a little more interesting that we have the same name at Beckley. And in this FBI interview, the landlady Gladys Johnson mentions that Donald Green was there, advised the only person who had left her rooming house in the past 30 days was Donald Green. And this is a week after the assassination, the date of this report. So he's the only one who has left since the assassination. Green was employed during the day, whereabouts unknown, and attended SMU at night. After the assassination of the president, there were newspaper reporters and photographers in the residence continuously during the day and night, and Green told Mrs. Johnson that he was unable to study at night after returning from school, and he was moving to his aunt's residence, Mrs. J.H. Landreen, or Lamdreen. Mrs. Johnson did not know the address of Mrs. Lamdreen. Mrs. Johnson had discussed Oswald with Green, and Green has never met Oswald, and had never seen him while both were rooming at Mrs. Johnson's residence, the FBI said that Mrs. Johnson said. Now the name, and it is a lame name, Lamdreen is a non-existent name. I don't know who made it up. I don't know if Mrs. Johnson made it up, or if the FBI made it up, or if Donald Green made it up. But it's not a real name. And Mark Bridger in 2008 wrote this about Donald Green. British journalist Jean Campbell was one of the reporters on the ground in Dallas immediately after the assassination, writing for the London Evening Standard. Her reports at that important time, before the dust had settled, are important historical insights. In the edition of November 29th, exactly 1 week after the assassination, Campbell describes a visit to Oswald's rooming house at 1026 North Beckley and the swift departure from there of a young boarder in the immediate aftermath of the murder. Entitled "The Backroom Boy Vanishes," it states the boy from the back room in the Dallas household where Oswald lived, Mrs. Johnson's boarding house at 1026 North Beckley Street, I have now learned disappeared from the house just after the president's murder. His name was Don, and he wore, according to other boarders, a new suit every day. He seemed well off, and he boasted that he had a rich Dallas aunt who kept him in funds. This young man was presumably Donald Green, who, according to Mary Farrell's database, worked during the day and attended SMU at night. He may have suddenly moved to his aunt's, a Mrs. James Landrum. Now, I don't know where Bridger got the name Mrs. James Landrum, because the FBI report says it's Lamdreen, but if we look in the 1961 Dallas directory, we can see that there is a James H. Landrum. In fact, there's two of them. One, I think, is a plumber. I think that's what that means. And another one is some kind of salesman. And Hetty, presumably, would be his aunt. Now, my desire to say this is the same person that is the police officer might be contradicted by this idea that he's a student, that he's a boy, but the age is never given here, description is never given here, and he is going to night school, and police officers often do go to night school. So I don't consider my idea to be disproven. And the last thing I'm going to bring up is what Patrolman D.A. Green did on the day of the assassination. He appears in the radio transcript, and just here, this is all there is. He says 498 is going back, and the dispatcher says 10-4, 498 out, 159. So this is just like 4 minutes after Oswald had been arrested, according to the radio traffic. So to me, it sounds as if the dispatcher knows that Patrolman Green is out doing something. He knows where he is, he knows what he's doing, and when he says he's heading back, or he's going back, the dispatcher says he's out. Green doesn't say he's out. So I think the implication is the dispatcher knows exactly what's going on with D.A. Green, and yet there's no other communication on the radio. So this is a secret mission he's on. That is, it's secret to me and to anyone else who doesn't already know. It doesn't necessarily mean it's nefarious. It doesn't necessarily mean he's part of the conspiracy. But they're keeping it a secret here, and so that has me interested. So he's on special assignment here, and I don't know what that special assignment is. I think this would have been a good lead for a real investigation to look into. The FBI could certainly have found Donald Green if he was going to SMU at nights. The FBI could certainly have done that, and there's no indication that they even tried. There's nothing in the paperwork that I've been able to find. So it seems to me that something's being hidden here, and maybe it's being hidden for considerations of his privacy. I don't know. But it makes me suspicious, and I think this is a lead that a real investigative effort would have followed up on.